20th, 2015 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Please take the roll.
Ms. Langford?
Present.
Ms. Ellsburn?
Here.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Barron?
Here.
Ms. Caldwell Johnson?
Here.
Ms. Newcomb?
Here.
Ms. Boson?
Here.
Great. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
I would actually poll number 7 for discussion item vote. Can I make a motion?
Ms. Boson can amend her
Oh, yeah, she
motion.
And the motion to move number 7 to the regular agenda.
Do we have a second. We have a motion by Ms. Boson, a second by Ms. Newcomb to approve the agenda, removing item 7. Please vote.
Approval of the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you messed that one up now.
Yeah, seriously. That's my problem here. Vote is approved 7-0.
No, that was the agenda.
Okay, we're just good. Okay. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from October 6, 2015?
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Ellsburn and a second by Ms. Boson. Please vote.
Do it again.
Did it again. It didn't.
Motion is approved 6-0 with 1 abstaining.
I didn't see.
Didn't see the abstaining.
District recognitions. Do we have any district recognitions?
We opted for no student or district recognitions this evening because of parent-teacher conferences going on. It was difficult to, without interrupting that schedule, to have students and families here, so we'll double up next month.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. We appreciate your input. Ms. Caldwell Johnson, do you have the motion?
Mr. Chair, I do, but before entertaining the motion, I would like to announce a procedural change that we're going to be undertaking. Tonight, we are announcing a change to the board's process for reviewing bills paid by the district and requiring certification prior to approval. I've had a chance to review this change with the district's legal counsel, Drew Bracken, and CFO Thomas Harper to ensure compliance with the board's powers and duties relative to the claims and investments set out in the Iowa Code. I have distributed a copy of Section 279.29 of the Iowa Code to board members for their review. This section of the code states that an audit can be undertaken by one or more members of the board designated by the board or by a certified public accountant employed by the board and certified to the board by such member or members of the board or by such accountant. The change we will be making effective with this meeting is to defer bill review and certification to the district's CFO, who is also a CPA and is an authorized reviewer based on Section 279 of the Code. This section will satisfy the requirements of Section 279. In addition, and as required of all school districts, an independent auditor is retained by the district and will continue its annual review of all district funds with a report to both the audit committee and the full board. Finally, the motion to approve the consent agenda, including the payment of bills certified by the board's designee, will continue to be made by an individual member of the board, which this evening is myself. So before proceeding, I would certainly entertain any questions that anyone might have.
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
All right, do we have a motion?
We do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $1,538,711.86, and unpaid bills in the amount of $3,239,795.40.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson and a second by Ms. Ellsburn. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Consent items are approved. We move on to item number 7.
Probably the public, well, I would move on to the public hearing,
And then come
because
back to
item
that.
7 is moved to other.
Oh, fair point. All right, so the next item on the agenda is item E1, public hearing for renovation of Mann Education Center. Public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E1, public hearing for renovation of Mann Education Center?
No one for the public hearing. Close it.
Okay, hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Larison Architects for the renovation of the Mann Education Center, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
Thank you. May I please have a, well,
Presentation.
let's, we have presentation on this item?
Mhm.
Mr. Good?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. We're here tonight to give a brief overview of the Mann Educational Center final plans. And this is a 2015-16 project from our 5-year plan, 10-year vision. And tonight, Randy Olson here, Special Ed District-wide Administrator, is here to answer potentially any student-related questions. And this is Mike Stodola, the Principal Architect with Larison and Associates of Des Moines. And Mike, you're going to run through the plans, and we'll go from there.
Good evening. I'm Mike Stodola. I'm a registered architect and principal in charge of this project for our design team. I'd like to start out by saying thank you. We very much appreciate the continued opportunities to be of service to the district on architectural projects such as this. Moving to this project, this is the, thank you. The site is bounded on the north by Wade Street, and that provides the primary entrance to the site. I have a little trouble with this.
So let me run it for you. You go ahead.
Okay. The site is upgraded and the modular classrooms that exist are removed. All new paving, parking lots, sidewalks, and such. The new main entrance to the building is developed on the north side with a new entry canopy. We have a security entrance inside the building. Also, element that we can see here on the site plan is a new elevator, which is being built inside the courtyard to provide access to the second floor. The design of the site is designed to accommodate ADA and handicapped accessibility throughout the entire site. Landscaping is added to enhance the entire site, and we'll be sodding and seeding the entire site as well. The new entrance canopy is shown on this first floor plan, and the secure vestibule entrance inside of that. The activities, community partnerships offices are off of the main entrance in the secure vestibule. Additional offices for staff are provided south of that. North, by the way, is up on this plan. We have before and after school programs, or district staff offices, community education, adult education, and multi-purpose rooms, and a computer lab. The learning services program is also incorporated in this portion of the existing building. Turning point is also provided for in the two southwest classrooms. The courtyard provides a potential area for a garden, and the large multi-purpose room is flanked by a pantry and a kitchen. A food pantry, yeah. The second floor is accessed by the elevator in the lobby. Yeah. On the second floor, we have the high school focus program with classrooms, a multi-purpose room with offices and a student shower. Therapist offices and facilities for the entire floor. Once again, the elevator serving access to the first floor. The top elevation is the north elevation that shows the new entrance canopy and the development of the exterior of the building. I guess there's later slides here showing the new windows, doors, and other elements of the exterior improvements. Slip in here.
As Mr. Stodola said, we are continuing to remove mobile classrooms in our school district, and there's a pod of 8 at this particular location that currently serves students and staff. Those students and staff would be going to the second floor of Mann, and the mobiles would be removed. There is some uniqueness to this building because there's a mixture of student programming and adult programming in the same building to optimize the use of the space, and should be a welcome experience for both. Also, we have a couple current projects that are underway. One is the window replacement. We're getting a jump on the renovations by getting that part of the work done. So that's not part of these plans. The roof has been replaced, and we're in there doing asbestos abatement to keep us on schedule, so when we jump to the interior renovation at a later time. This is a timeline on this project. Obviously tonight it's board review and potential approval of the final plans. The bid will come to you on December 8th. We're looking at construction starting in January, and we expect completion in early August of 2016. And the budget for this project is $4.5 million. Much of that is mechanical and electrical because the building is not air-conditioned, but it will be. So with that, between Randy, Mike, and I, if there's any questions that we can answer, we'd be happy to do that.
In fact, it's not even being used by any adults right now.
It's been a long time since I was there, but the two classrooms, were they ever, they're totally separate, weren't they, the two outside classes? Is that going to be connected a little bit more, or are they still going to be separate?
The mobile classrooms.
No, they're actually the two in the
The
front.
southwest
yes.
I think
classrooms
they
where
used to be
Turning
the
Points is
front,
going
but
to
maybe
be.
it's the back now.
Yeah, it's the Turning Point program, and they
Alright.
will still be separate, and that was designed that way. It's a program we operate in partnership with juvenile court.
Yeah, no,
And so
I think
that-
it was a unique building when they built that.
Very much so.
Great, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
May I please have a motion and a second to approve item E1, public hearing for renovation of Mann Education Center?
Second it.
Motion by Ms. Caldwell Johnson, second by Ms. Bozen. Please vote. Item passes 7-0. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, item 7.
Next item on our agenda is item 7 pulled from the consent agenda, which is open enrollment, late applications for denial. May I please have a motion, should we have a discussion on that item?
Should I? I'll explain. Do you mind if I quickly explain why I pulled them, I guess? Or Sure. Well, I just felt that it was important that since the parents took their time to fill out this form and it comes before the board, that we should acknowledge that individually, not just do a consent agenda item. And just make parents know that we respect their time, and regardless how the vote turns out or how an individual board member feels, the parents should feel like they were still part of that process and not just a consent agenda item. So I'll probably pull it every time. That was why I did that.
Ms. Bozen?
No, I was just going to say, I have no more, if you want to move, I can move approval. If there's no one other discussion.
Is there any other discussion?
I was just going to offer that I would certainly entertain a motion after we take action on this particular item, if you'd like to move, that the board consider moving open enrollment to the regular agenda for a vote. That way we vote it up or down, and that way
Yeah.
we have the opportunity to make a decision about whether or not it stays on consent or whether or not it moves to a regular action item. So have you already made your motion?
Well, I did, but I can,
Second.
on the first issue, which is the
Yes.
actual
Okay,
design of the open enrollment,
Correct.
what is on our agenda.
Ms. Ellsworth?
I was just going to ask a procedural question. So can we add that second vote to the agenda? You're going to do that next?
Yeah.
I
We
would,
would probably have to put it on a subsequent
Right,
agenda
gotcha.
because it's
Okay.
not noticed,
Th-
but we can
gotcha.
certainly,
Yep. Oh, I understand.
okay, we have a motion by Ms. Bozen, a second by Ms. Caldwell Johnson. If there's no other comments, please vote. Item passes 7-0. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item F1, Annual United Way Partnership Report. And I believe we have a presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Sellers, and this is my colleague Kate Bennett. We're here from United Way just to talk a little bit about our important partnership with the Des Moines Public Schools. First, Kate is passing out this year's Community Impact Report Card. We do this report card each year, and it shows the community our broad progress on our goals for 2020. And as you receive the report card and open it up, you can see we have 3 main areas of focus for United Way. 1 in education, 1 in income, and in health. Our education goal is to have a graduation rate of 95%. We measure 20 school districts in Polk, Dallas, and Warren, so that is reflective of all 20 school districts that we work with at United Way. Our focus area in education is early grade learning. We have a big issue that we want to make sure that we address, which is we have almost 25% of kids going into 4th grade that aren't proficient. And that is one of the biggest indicators of whether they will graduate from high school on time. To the right of that, you can see why that's important, and you can also see some of the ways that United Way is investing funding, deploying volunteers, and working to move legislation at the state level to help us accomplish this goal in education. We've made great progress since we've launched these goals. You can see back in 2008, we were at 83.36. So we've made great progress in the time that we have been focusing our attention on this particular area. And I'm going to turn it over to Kate. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the partnerships that we do have with Des Moines Public Schools and some of the data sharing.
Thanks, Mary. As Mary mentioned, the progress that we've made on the high school graduation rate, and we make as we work on our grade level reading, I just wanted you all to know some of the things that United Way invests in that Des Moines Public Schools does. And academic support labs are a huge part and have been a huge part of that rising graduation rate. We believe it's critical in our community. The community school coordinators that work in the feeder patterns at each of the buildings that really help solidify those school community partnerships and make sure that community programs have access to the schools and are getting the right students, hooking up the right students with the right programs. The Success Program, which does great work at all levels, really working with those high-risk families and making sure that they're getting their basic needs met and that they have an advocate through their education process. Keys to Success is a literacy program that we work with that's for middle school kids that are right on the bubble of proficiency. And that's a before and after school program that supports those kids that want to come or that need that extra reading help. Run DSM, Minorities on the Move, I'm sure you're all familiar with that, but our Education Leaders Initiative group at United Way has a strong passion for that and sees the great work that that program has done. The Wolf Pack, which we're funding at 3 schools, let's see if I can remember, Harding, McKinley, and I can't remember the third one. We just added it this, McCombs and Hyatt, thank you. So that we built on the success of that Jake had started, and the ELI group loves hearing about that. We do fund in early childhood licensed social workers that work with the preschool program and with their families to make the connection between the families and the school and help kids that struggle with issues of mental health or developmental delays, anything like that. And then we've partnered extensively the past 2 years with Des Moines Public Schools, primarily through the 21st Century program for the Summer in the City program. And we've had great results, which we can share with you maybe another time, but where we've been really able to show growth in children's reading scores over the summer, which traditionally, low income and at-risk children tend to lose ground over the summer. So those are all partnerships that we're really proud of. The other thing I just wanted to mention briefly is our data sharing partnership, and we, through our work with the community school coordinators, have funded a community data liaison at the district. And what that has done for us at United Way and for the community partners that United Way funds is huge, because what we're able to do now is work with those partners to know how their kids, the kids that are coming, for example, to Boys and Girls Club or Children and Family Urban Ministries or Oak Ridge, they can get the data in the aggregate on those kids and find out how many of those kids are failing, how many of those kids are chronically absent, how many of those kids are having office referrals. Then they can really hone their efforts to be more effective. So that's beneficial for us at United Way because it makes our money be better spent, and then beneficial for the partners because it allows them to really target their efforts on the kids that need it the most and have more data about how their services are paying off for the kids in school. So, questions about any of those?
Ms. Bozen?
More a comment. I serve on the education cabinet, but I just want to thank United Way for what they've done for Des Moines schools. These partnerships have been a critical difference, not only from early childhood all the way through. And being on those committees and looking at the different agencies, there's more accountability than there ever had been. And that really started about, 6, 7 years ago. And so I think the community should feel good, and we should feel good for the efforts and supports that they've given us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further? Ms. Langford?
I want to echo Connie's appreciation. Everything that we're talking about, these partnerships are huge. I had one question about the 21st century work that you're doing with young people in the summer times, particularly because we're looking at proficiency in our reading, our literacy rates with high school students today. And so I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of that programming and how you've seen students grow and what you've been doing.
Yeah, so we've worked with our data liaison and the data people at United Way. We look at the spring SRI and SMI, so we look at both the reading and the math, and then we look at the fall, and we can see if there's a gain or a loss. And what we've seen for the past 2 years, and this will be kind of a generalization, but the kids that have attended, 80% of the time and have been in programs that are offered 5 days a week for more than, 2 or 3 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks on average, they have gained in their reading. They have gained in math, but not as significantly as what they have in reading. So we see that as a huge success because some kids can lose an average of 6 months of reading over the summer, and we have seen gains.
And are we talking about elementary age students or middle school
Elementary
students?
and middle,
Elementary.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I guess I wanted
Ms.
to-
Anderson?
I'm sorry. I guess I wanted to know a little bit more of a description of what your Summer in the City program is. Maybe you talked about it a little bit, but.
Sure. Well, we have a variety of
Offer it.
programs that we do, and that's kind of why we call it Summer in the City, because it's broad, and it's even broader than Des Moines. We're also in Urbandale and West Des Moines. But we partner with Des Moines Public Schools. I think we were in 5 Des Moines schools this year. The Y, the Grub Y, has a Y Readers grant that they've brought to the table, which has also been a huge part of what we've done. So we try to do academics in the morning, and enrichment in the afternoon. And we bring in other partners like the after school arts, ASAP, cultural, and some of those other, we try to incorporate swimming lessons, physical activity, nutrition, financial literacy for the parents. So it's a well-rounded program.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Any further comments?
I just wanted to make one more comment, if I may. I wanted to thank the school board and the school district for the graduation walk. Congratulations on the Magna Award last spring. Well deserved. Our volunteers find this a very valuable experience. And the one thing that I think, bar none, that these volunteers say to us is the compassion and knowledge that the staff of the school district has of the students we're going to see. We go to houses and they say, I know the brother, I know the sister, I know this background, and they know these students. They're not just numbers, they're students, and that really has made quite an impression on the hundreds of volunteers that United Way brings to this effort. I had the good fortune of presenting to the United Way of the USA board last month. I was proud to represent our community in our United Way, and one of the things they wanted me to talk about is our partnership with the Des Moines Public Schools, and they were holding that up as an example that potentially other local United Ways could learn from. So we value this partnership, we value the good work that we can do together, and that we can engage our community in. So thank you very much.
If I may just recognize quickly too that Matt Smith and Allison Vukovic and I meet regularly with both Mary, Kate, and Elizabeth Bach, and we've made, I think, we've truly collaborated around how can we, especially around data sharing, making those agreements easier, making it easier for parents to give permission to share data when appropriate. So as Kate referenced, we can make sure that we're leveraging each of those dollars as effectively as possible. And I want to recognize that it's more work sometimes doing things the way that we're doing it, but it's absolutely more effective and a better stewardship of the money that's so generously donated to United Way through the entire community.
And you really can't underscore that enough, because before we had the data sharing, it was just agencies telling us kids that they were serving and us thinking, well, you know, they're doing good work, they're good programs, but now we know and we can see, and then the agencies can see. So it's beneficial all around. And I think the community school staff then can also start to look at, okay, where are the programs that we should be referring kids to? Where do we need more of this or less of this? So it's huge.
Yeah.
And thank you, Dr. Ahart, for serving on our board.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks, you too.
much. Well, the next item on our agenda is item F2, High School Literacy Monitoring Report. May I please have a motion and a second to approve item F2?
Move approval?
Motion by Ms. Ellsburn, and a second by Ms. Bozen, and I believe we have a presentation.
We do. We do. Good evening. I'm glad to be back. I said you'd see a lot of me, and you will. I'm Tim Schott, Secondary Schools Executive Director. I'm also a parent of a high school student in our district, so this report is near and dear to my heart. With me is Noel Tickey and Jeremy Swannon, and we will be sharing with you our high school literacy monitoring report, the first of 3 high school reports, as you know, and intermixed in there will be a middle school report that Corey Harris and I will bring to you as well. I want to point out again, as I've done the last few times, that the collaboration on this effort is really in 2 phases. There's an obvious collaboration, which is represented by who's sitting at the table tonight and during all these reports. Office of Academics and Office of Schools, we're working very closely together, and you'll hear more about those details as we talk about next steps and our priorities. But also, I need to reach out to the business and finance folks who provide the funding and the data security, our operations team that continue to improve the learning environments for our students, provide the food and the transportation that is so vital to them and their ability to learn. And lastly, to our human resources team who, quite frankly, works to secure our greatest resource, which is our talented staff. So that it's absolutely a team effort. And then I'd like us to help us focus on why we're here by showing you some photos and reminding us all of why we exist. So these are high school students in action. Criminal Justice Group, which is here at Central Campus with students from all of our high schools. The second one is East PEP Leadership, and I particularly appreciate the collaboration with our SRO folks in that one. And the third one is at North High School, kicking off College Application Month, which I think is perfect for at the next stage of their lives. And then the last group is a group shot that includes a cross-representation of our boisterous and wonderfully glorious high school students. And so with that, let's get into a couple terms. They're the same as before, so we're not going to belabor them as thoroughly as we have on other reports. But proficient is the percent of students who score at or above a particular cut score. And then typical growth is the amount the average student increases in standard score points from one year to the next. And we'll dig into those far more thoroughly. And then the last piece is just a refresher on the KPIs for this report. So this is really 2 phases. The monitoring report itself involves us reporting on specific KPIs that you've asked for, actually, in collaboration with us, and those are listed there on that slide. Additionally, each time we bring resources and data points that either you requested ahead of time through questions, or we anticipate you might ask and we never get that exactly right, or Tom has indicated this might be interesting to share with the board. So we have some of those items tonight as well. And with that, we'll let Jeremy start talking about the data. You know what? Before I have him do that, I want. Thanks, Jeremy, for your patience. I want to paint a picture for this report. I've been here for the last 3 talking about middle school, and I want to paint the picture here that this report is not as universally positive as the middle school reports. We know that. We're not up here saying, isn't this great? There are certainly bright spots, and we'll point those out, and there are also opportunities for improvement, and we'll point those out, and I'm sure you'll help us find some of those as well. Go ahead, Jeremy.
We started with the percent completing English 1 with a C or higher by the end of 9th grade. That is a number that has been consistently improving. One of our foundational keys to success for students is to start that high school career with a successful experience in English 1, with English carrying the largest number of required credits for graduation. We know that students who start at a disadvantage with success in English 1 start in a hole in terms of credits, and they remain in that hole for an awfully long time. So we're happy to see that number continue to improve, but also knowing that simply improving the number of kids who pass isn't getting us what we need. We also need to improve the degree of skill that students are leaving that class with. Here we have the grade 11 ACT English percent meeting the college readiness benchmark trend. And as you can see, there is a gradual but predictable decline in this. The English test on the ACT is a measure of rhetoric and grammar, 2 very specific skills that are not measured on any of our other accountability tests. We don't take tests on the Iowa assessment that measure rhetoric or grammar. So it's a unique piece of data for us, and I think we'll talk a little bit more as we get going about what we know about this data and what this data tells us we have to do next. The reading test, on the other hand, tells us a similar story to other pieces of data that we collect throughout a student's secondary experience. As we can see here, while we had a slight jump last year, kind of back to a holding steady pattern around that 24% of students meeting that readiness benchmark.
Participation.
We have a different participation experience in Des Moines Public Schools than most of the other schools in the state. And it's really important for us to always keep that in mind when we look at this. We'll have specific data here for you in a minute, but 85% of our students participate in taking the ACT thanks to the initiatives for universal access. We know that is not as many as we want. We want 100% of our kids taking the ACT. But at 85%, we paint a very different picture of student performance than most of our peers in other districts, where only the students who self-select to take the ACT do so. We were able to pull a little bit of data from Waterloo Public Schools just for some comparison. We've got that coming up for you here. The Iowa assessment reading score for grades 9 through 11, so for all secondary or for all high school levels that are tested, is sitting at that 67.68%, a slight decline from last year, but you've heard lots through the middle school reports about the form change effect and how last year's numbers in general had an uphill swing that we're then rebounding from. But the rebound isn't nearly as precipitous as we might have seen. Like there. This is the aggregate of typical students making typical growth. We know that that number is a composite of the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And so we actually wanted to dig a little bit deeper into seeing where is that fall coming from. And so here on this following slide here, we've actually pulled it apart and looked at the typical growth, the percentage of students making typical growth in 9th, 10th, and 11th. They're stacked one on top of the other. That's just how it shook out. But as you can see, the 11th grade number paints a very different picture than the 9th or 10th grade numbers. Not that we're content with a decline on any of those levels, no. But looking at them separately, it tells us specifically where some specific actions need to happen.
Are these numbers comparable from year to year, or should we be flipping from 13 to 15?
It's looking at last year's scores as compared to this year's scores. So
all-
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
some additional data to help paint a fuller picture of what we just looked at. Here we have the individual demographic breakdowns of students completing English 1 with a C or higher, just to get a picture of where that initiative and improvement is reflected. A profound improvement in the multiracial demographic, whereas the others are not so notably different. This is our ACT participation information. Waterloo Public Schools, I conferenced with their associate superintendent yesterday, and 47.8% of their juniors took the ACT. And for us, 85.3%, which means our numbers paint a much more comprehensive picture of where our students are at. It also just makes, in general, it's good for us to look at our ACTs in comparison to ourselves, but harder, but not impossible, to look at them in comparison to other people. And our participation is consistently improving. I mean, it was the 2014-2015 ACT participation was 54 more students than the year before that. Not substantially different, but every time we have more access for more kids, we're going to get a more clear picture. Demographic breakdowns on the English ACT score. This is the percentage of the students who took the test that reached the college readiness benchmark in English. Remember, that's grammar and rhetoric as compared to reading on the next slide.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Did you already explain what college readiness benchmark means?
ACT determines what the what their cut score is for where a student who met that cut score is determined to be college ready. And they determine that by looking at all the data in aggregate and then drawing that line, much as how we declare what is the proficiency line on the Iowa assessment. I don't know off the top of my head what the specific score is for that point. It is a different score for each test in the ACT. It's not just one number.
But as opposed to the Iowa assessments, I believe the ACT sets that cut score based on the predictive value of that score and their completing college on time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's actually tied to a actual tangible
Or
result.
meaningful measure.
And I believe without remediation as well.
Yes.
Right.
Is there some idea that that's an indicator of a B, potential for a B or above in a college course?
I don't believe that correlation has been made, but we can check with our assessment folks.
Yeah.
Okay.
That there might be.
Mary
some-
I'm
was
just
here,
trying to
she could explain.
remember,
Yeah.
just having had a child go through ACTs, there's some correlation to
Okay.
what they are expected to,
Follow up on
how
that.
they're expected to perform.
I believe that's right.
That's assuming college grades are accurate.
Consistent.
Standards reference.
Then we have the Iowa assessment data pulled out into demographic subgroups and that trend over 4 years. This is the aggregate of grades 9, 10, and 11 again. And you can see in the lighter blue colored column that form change effect that we mentioned earlier, less noticeable at the high school level than it is at the middle school level. And the percent making at least typical growth trend by subgroup. Specific information on the African American subgroup. Again, noting that 2014 has that notable increase, but that the rebound does not wipe away that increase. And the Hispanic subgroup. region subgroup. And this is the number of students who reach the advanced level on the Iowa assessments, crossing that line from the proficiency band to the advanced band. So you can see over the course of the last 4 years, that number for all students has increased. And then we break it down into demographic information to see the more specific impacts.
And per the board's request, last meeting, I think, Terry, you asked for specific numbers. So we did include an appendix in the back of this report that you can reference numbers to accompany the percentages. Okay, do you mind if we switch spots? Okay, response to data. Again, some similar trends to what we've been speaking with you about, because we don't have, other than a few specific areas, we don't have significantly different actions for just a particular grade level or a particular subset of data. So we're looking at how do we have systems level improvement across the board. So they're looking for those high leverage strategies. So of course, we've talked a lot about this instructional framework and what that means for us in Des Moines, and it's really exciting to see this start to take hold with our teachers. So now we can begin to walk in classrooms and speak the same language about what is good instruction. So the instructional framework is broken into 41 specific elements. We absolutely don't expect our teachers to master all 41. However, it allows us a place where teachers can goal set in specific areas and then work with their principal, their instructional leader, or their instructional coach to say, this is an area where I want to improve and get better. And they have a framework to actually set those goals and have very specific and deliberate practice in that area. So our instructional coach program has taken off as a result of that framework to give us now really specific ways to help teachers improve their practice. And it's driven by their choice areas on where they want to get better. Having said that, we also have district-wide priorities, such as learning goals and scales that we want everyone to improve on, but we think that choice for teachers and owning their professional growth is also a really important part of this. In addition, as you've heard repeatedly, our school leader development with our directors, working to build capacity with our principals through our Wallace grant and work, and truly spending 75% of their time in schools with leaders focusing on instruction is a far cry. It's a big change, progress for how we used to spend our time as leaders. As I alluded to, a renewed instructional coach program focused on teacher development. I'm really excited right now. We have a large-scale effort to capture instructional practices of some of our best teachers on video. We're using our TLC grant to do that, so that we're creating a library of best practices that our teachers can access at any time to start to see their peers in action and what this looks like with kids in Des Moines, how to systematically improve and redefine what is good teaching. As you're all well aware, we've been in full implementation of standards reference grading, and this has been through grades now 6 through most courses in 10th grade. We'll continue to work on that and focus on rigor. One thing I wanted to point out is there's multiple advantages to this system. One is from kind of a cultural competency lens. And just to give you an example of kind of when I became personally interested in this work, I was at Hyatt Middle School as a school improvement leader, and we were examining our failure rates. And what we discovered was 50% of our failure rates were due to students not completing homework. And so as middle schoolers, they're forming opinions about themselves. We're telling them you're failing science when in reality, you're not doing school. You're not playing our game, right? And a lot of our students had legitimate reasons as to why maybe they weren't completing their homework. And so that was the first sign to me that our system is broken and we're harming kids. So as part of that, we know we separate those academic standards and skills from those behaviors that we want to see it from our students and support them in that. But we know that sometimes those less than desirable behaviors were impacting the academic grade. Now we have a clearer picture of you might have complete mastery of the content and you're earning an A in that course, but we need to work on some of your academic conduct, and that's a different intervention. So it's allowing us a lot more clarity, and I think supporting our students to kind of persevere through those struggles, because we're not punishing them through that grade, that it becomes a reflection of what they know and can do. In regard to rigor, I had an opportunity with some of the elementary directors this last week, and I know a couple of our other administrators visited a school where we got a glimpse into what I think is our future around both standards reference grading and the instructional framework partnered together. We had an opportunity to go to an elementary school who was further along in the journey than we are, and we saw the most rigorous classrooms that I've ever seen. We saw second graders saying things like, "I'd like to challenge your thinking on that. I have evidence that might that I'd like to present to you that might influence where you stand on this issue. Would you like to revise your thinking based on this new evidence?" And it was so cool because it was the Common Core come to life. And really, it was a standards-based classroom that supported rigorous and relevant curriculum and activities for kids. So I guess it gave us a lot of hope that we're on the right track, and if we stay the course and continue to focus on teachers and investing in building their capacity, that we can get there in very short order. To Jeremy's point about ACT and our concern with our ACT trend that we're seeing, even though we are pleased with our participation going up, we're not pleased with the scores and the average college and career readiness percentages. We have already anticipated this. We know that grammar usage and mechanics makes up about 60% of that assessment, and over the past 10 years, and I think this is probably not just a Des Moines issue, grammar instruction kind of flew out the window. We're not even sure where it went, but it was gone. So we have reintegrated that back into our middle and high school classrooms, not the old-fashioned skill and drill that we all remember the diagramming sentences. We're not doing that. But we are integrating it more into our writing curriculum and providing teachers some resources to teach that more explicitly. So we are addressing that gap with our English scores and hoping that that change and modification in curriculum will help support that. We've also increased access to text and complex text for all of our students, regardless of the coursework that they're in. And we've done that through a variety of everyone from purchasing books to online software that's adaptive and responsive to the readers. In regard to intervention, we are getting closer to having kind of a consistent and predictable experience for all of our students, regardless of where they go to school. So as I alluded to, we have adopted what we call Achieve 3000, and it's this really great software that allows students to engage in nonfiction rigorous text at their instructional level, and then the teacher comes back and works with them in a small group setting and then bumps them up to grade level text. So they had an opportunity to read it at their own level, get a handle on vocabulary. It's really vocabulary heavy for our ELL students, but then come back and work on it in a much higher, more rigorous opportunity. So that software has helped us plan for higher levels experience for our kids. As I said, with stronger focus on grade level nonfiction text in all of our classrooms, and our continued support of close reading strategies, which is heavily, that we teach kids how to engage in nonfiction text. You don't read it the same that you do a novel. So helping our teachers support students in that, navigating that text. In addition, our special ed department has done a tremendous job of ramping up the support that they've been providing to both special ed teachers and interventionists in our district-wide PLC time, kind of pulling them out separately and knowing that they're serving kids with unique needs, and how do we help high school teachers become better teachers of reading, because that's not been part of their traditional pathway always. So with that, we will turn it over to you for questions and comments.
Questions, comments? Ms. Newcomb.
I had, I guess, a couple of questions, especially since SRG was brought up. How is the SRG data going to be used for us to kind of better understand it? Like, I know specifically, I still have a lot of questions what level 4 really means. But since there's obviously a lot of components that we can look at our students and how they're achieving without the behavioral aspects to it, how can we see our data change or be useful for that for us when evaluating our students?
So we've looked at several data points, and I'm happy to share a visual. I think I shared it a few times with the school board. I think it was prior to your arrival, where it's a Tableau dashboard, and it's access to all of our students' achievement that teachers have by standard. And so just organizing it, it's such a simple thing that it's not simple. But logically thinking that we just look at our achievement by standard. We also have grade correlation data that we're looking at that's looking very promising when we look at our achievement, our average GPAs, and comparing that to how students are performing on external measures. We're seeing that correlation improve, so that tells us that we're on the right path. So we have, and then of course our middle school student achievement data, which is the most significant increases that we've seen in 10 years. We have lots of data points pointing in the right direction. Is that answering your question?
I think I'm probably looking a little bit broad, and I have more of a specific question too. Like the level 4 is above grade. I don't know what that actually means. I want to answer that.
The level 4, and I'll speak predominantly for language arts since that's where I spend all of my time, but means that the task is at a cognitive level that exceeds the grade level target. For most of our students, in most of our standards for language arts, that means it's an analysis level. So looking at, for example, Bloom's educational taxonomy, we know that evaluation and creation happen at a higher level of cognitive engagement than analysis and application. So it's really finding opportunities where students can push themselves to not just analyze a piece, but really evaluate it against a set of metrics that they determine and then defend that analysis. Okay. So that's the direction that we're pushing with at level 4 in most of the language arts standards, since they're all analysis driven.
Okay. But what would that look like as a lesson plan?
Oh, that's as easy as saying, if we're looking at theme, it's as easy as asking the question, we've talked about what the theme is, and we've talked about how the author presents that theme. Was the author effective? What are your criteria for that effectiveness? Can you articulate what makes that author's use of a theme effective or not effective? It's really getting students to be able to push their thinking about their own thinking to a more discrete place where they can really expand on it and explain it and defend it.
Okay. And then I guess more generally, especially since we're looking at, unless anyone has any questions on that. Sorry. Okay. As far as doing all these testing and everything, have we spoken with the teachers? Have they had some input, particularly, you have the Achieve 3000, any feedback throughout the progress on any of these, especially since we're seeing a decline in some places?
The process that we went through.
Achieve 3000's adoption has been very much an opt-in piece where the teachers are the ones who select that we engage with that. Achieve is predominantly used at the middle school. We use it at the 9th grade reading intervention level, and then various places are starting to adopt it at the high school, but it's still pretty new in terms of wide usage at the high school level. Mm-hmm. But we have our teachers come in, they have periodic monthly or semi-monthly meetings of their PLCs to talk about improvement on that. We have pretty strong, there's with every initiative, there are people who aren't as comfortable with it. We have a pretty strong engagement in terms of people who come in to learn more, and students. I've been in a lot of classrooms to see a level of student engagement that's actually surpassing what I had expected in terms of, I watched 50 kids in a room together at McCombs Middle School, all working on Achieve diligently, whether teachers are roaming around answering questions, and it makes this little ding when you get a comprehension question right. And I just heard this cloud of dings going on, and I thought that would be pretty darn annoying. But the kids were all over it. And that was a group of kids who, a few months earlier when they just launched it, the teachers had really struggled with getting the kids to connect to the nonfiction, because for some of them it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't the kind of reading that they enjoyed to do.
And it actually, the adoption of Achieve came out of the teacher's request and kind of cry for additional text to say we need better nonfiction text for ELL learners, for example. So if I'm an 8th grade boy, I don't want to read about bunnies. So this is an opportunity for them. It takes an article from USA Today, brings it down to an appropriate lexile, and allows students who are still learning the language or struggling readers to engage in intelligent content at a lower reading level.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually more specific with the Achieve program. But I guess I meant more generally speaking for teachers, particularly since we see the data over the years, the trend. Have we had an opportunity to really dig into what the teachers see happening in the classrooms themselves too? Not just very specifically on these tests, but generally speaking, having their input.
All of our curriculum design and assessment design is done by collaborative teacher teams with representatives from every building, which is something we're not able to do at elementary level because of the size of our elementary population. But for middle school and high school, we have, and it's a rotating group of teachers. I try really hard to not see the same teacher over and over again so that we can get a more comprehensive picture of what they're seeing and what needs to adjust in order to really reach the kids that they've been struggling with.
Anything more?
Sorry.
Please.
Is there a way, I know we're seeing the data breaking up in many, many different ways, but school level, just generally speaking, so we can see what's happening at the schools themselves?
Yeah, but we want to be careful about how we do that.
Yep,
Yeah.
I understand that.
We have dashboards that principals all have access to, so that the data is all there. Of course, when we look at it from a monitoring standpoint, we don't break it, we put it all together. But we're constantly looking at school level data, so.
Would it be something that we could see?
Well, I think that a discussion about that is warranted before we just open the floodgates to that. There are all sorts of, I think, unintended consequences that can happen as a result of that. So I think that's a discussion I'd like to have with the board before we start generally sharing building by building data.
Yeah, I would agree with the discussion, only because we have come up with these are the KIPs and we wanted to see it as a total. Because to go in by building, it was always thought that that was what their attention is, so we can see the total to get the monitoring of the total district. So, but I think that would have to be a discussion amongst all of us to decide if that's something that we think we need.
Okay, I have.
Natasha, you good?
I'm good, I'm sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Langford?
Well, recognizing that we're all here because we care about student success, I did have a question, as I'm sure you might have been anticipating, about the typical growth. Because typically when we're looking at that, I hear in my conversation with administrators and teachers, it's typically been almost a saving grace, right? Well, we know that standardized test scores are hard, but when we look at typical growth, we see gains. So I was just wondering if you all had any insight as to why, amongst all the subgroups, it decreased about that 10-12%.
Well, I will tackle the 11th grade one specifically. Statewide, the average standard score for a 11th grader went down by 5 points. That just doesn't happen, and yet it did. The average 11th grader scored lower on the last Iowa assessment than the average 10th grader statewide. So we don't know what that is. That it feels like a testing anomaly, not a Des Moines Public Schools anomaly, but something with the 11th grade test. And if we look at the report that Noelle has pulled up here, you'll see, whereas everyone in 9th and 10th grade experienced that uptick in 2014, the 11th grade did not, and that was the first year of using the current form of the test. So if there is something that's not as sound about the 11th grade test as the others, that's where it shows up in both years with that steady decline instead of that kind of wobble. So that's the 11th grade issue. That doesn't answer the 9th and 10th grade one.
Yeah.
So really, the only thing I can say is what it comes down to, and obviously we have teachers and administrators and central office people working very, very hard. We have to improve instruction. at the end of the day, we have to improve rigor, higher expectations, and supporting kids and meeting those expectations. And that's why we have peeled off this huge thing with the instructional framework and tackling rigor through our work, because we, like every urban in the country, have suffered from painfully low expectations. And so that's the hard work that we're tackling. It's not always popular. It's pushing kids to uncomfortable levels, but we believe we have to stay the course.
Sure. And just so I'm clear, bear with me as a new member. So all of these key performance measures, you guys keep bringing up that the board asked for those measures. So that's how we've decided as an entity and body that we want to measure student proficiency in these areas.
Yeah, it was a collaborative process. The board reviewed all monitoring reports over the summer in a multi-day work session with staff, and made determinations of not just the key performance indicators that we wanted on each item, but rather how much in depth we wanted to go into some of the academic measures, because we weren't doing monitoring on things as narrow as high school literacy prior to this year.
Okay.
And it was a bit of a wrestling match as far as what those KPIs were going to be, because it was definitely a matter of consensus, because not all of us agreed on what we wanted to use for proficiency measures. But that is what the board landed on, or collaboratively.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. And I realize that the board asked for these KPIs during the summer. I'm just wondering, and I don't know, I don't have an answer or anything, if we could move, not totally away, we need the data, we need this data, but can we see it in a different way? Children's learning. I mean, I liked what you talked about when you went in the classroom and you heard the students and you interacted with them. How can we know more about that, I guess? Because not every student tests well. I mean, it's a fact. I don't know if you have any answer.
One thing that we that's a good point, Heather. One of the things that we discussed during those work sessions, where we were trying to come to a shared agreement around what KPIs we'll monitor over time, because if we change them all the time, there's very little value in them, obviously. And they're certainly not perfect, for sure. One thing that I will be asking the board to consider once we're a little bit further into the standards referenced grading will be to, when we can demonstrate some validity and technical reliability around those assessments, is to really use that as our primary measure of progress for students. Because the other thing that we talk about probably not frequently enough, when we're talking about growth on the Iowa assessments, that's not really a growth score. It's the best we can eke out from a norm reference test not designed to measure growth. So that's really that's a forced fit there. But we think it's important not just to talk about percent proficient, but also about how much movement our students are making. So this is less than perfect, and I think if we can get to the point, and I really am confident that the teachers have been doing phenomenal work around this, that especially in middle school and then eventually high school and down into elementary, the standards referenced grades will be a much more useful and meaningful measure of progress.
And those will be determined on a body of evidence. And so in that body of evidence, you might have performance tasks, you might have quizzes, you might have observations, you might have a project. And so we feel like multiple measures when determining that topic score is more reliable than a single event on a single day.
Particularly when that assessment is documented to not be aligned with what we're asking our teachers to teach. But then, there's also that argument that Iowa assessments are the state assessment, like it or not. And so that is the only yardstick used by the state to measure our success. So whether we take that off the monitoring report or not, we certainly would be sharing that with the board. And the other point too is it looks like in FY17, the state will be moving to the smarter balanced. So that's going to sort of clear the deck and start a new first year for baseline. So
talk about rigor.
Good. I have one more question, or a couple more. And I think you mentioned that school leaders are in the classroom 75% of the time now.
That would be the
25%.
directors. Do you want to speak to that?
Okay.
Our directors. So through the Wallace Grant, our emphasis on improving really the instructional leadership capacity of our principals has been driven by our directors. So we now have 6 of those who are spending 75% of their time with principals in buildings, observing, coaching, meeting, leading, modeling, in a lot of cases, instructional leadership, really helping our leaders change their job.
Do you like have a schedule, or how does that work? I mean, do you try and hit each school, or are you more, does it depend on the scores at an individual school? Sorry.
No, both, Heather, both. They have all our directors have a weekly schedule, which has been published widely. The entire district office knows their schedule, so they know when they're out in buildings and when they're thus not available for anything else. And then within that, there are certainly prioritized time based on what's going well, what needs, what opportunities exist at various schools. So they all differentiate their energy based on needs.
That's good. And they mainly are mentoring the principals and this
Correct.
teacher leaders, or just mainly just the principals?
Mainly the principal and their admin team.
Okay. And then one last question.
Sure.
So the new teacher leadership, all the new kind of jobs created through the TLC grant, is the idea after, the funding potentially isn't there, that this is a sustainable program somehow?
No.
No.
But I need to qualify that. One of the challenges that we had with the TLC was we ended up having to shift a bunch of already existing positions into that because we already had a structure in place and didn't specifically match all of the requirements of the TLC grant. So we have a number of new positions, but we also have a number of TLC-funded positions that formerly were not TLC-funded positions that already existed as part of our leadership framework and supporting teachers. So that's a really good question and one that we're continually wrestling with.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what the governor and the legislature decide to do with that TLC funding moving past next year. But we'll certainly still have a teacher leadership system in place. It'll probably be tweaked a bit once those particular grant funds go away.
Right. I mean, it's hard to make progress and then have the rug pulled out, right?
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any further comment, question? Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the very beginning of the presentation, you made a comment about seeing gradual but predictable decline. Help me understand what you meant when you said that.
The predictable decline in the ACT English test has to do with the fact that our kids were going substantial numbers of years without grammar instruction.
Okay.
And with grammar accounting for 60% of that test, there was no way that number was going to go up until we did something about that. I mean, our teachers were teaching rhetoric, but that on the best case scenarios, the best forms of the ACT rhetoric can only count for 50% of the ACT English score. So we were handcuffing our kids before they even walked in to take the test.
Sure. And I'm not for sure if we necessarily know this, but it sort of dawned on me that getting a better handle on the number of English language learners that are entering in that 9th, 10th, 11th grade year might shed some light on some of this data. Do we have a sense of, how many are entering during that really important window so that when they're taking this ACT, they don't have the benefit?
That is a fantastic question, and one I fielded a very similar question to that this morning. And no, we have not done that consistently, and that's a hugely important element in what those numbers look like. Because you're right, if you look at now the 11th grade, and if you remember, we had the same issue statewide on the Iowa assessments last year. 11th grade dropped all over the state. And there's no way that it wasn't tied somehow to the test form. There's just no other reasonable explanation. However, when you look at one class doing differently than another year to year in ACT. There certainly could be a reasonable explanation that if we had an influx of refugee students in a particular grade, where you have, we're testing about 1,600 kids, if a couple hundred of those got into our system and experienced school for the first time as 7th or 8th graders or 9th graders, it's really not reasonable to have an expectation that they would be testing at college ready, even if they've grown tremendously over that time. That's a great point.
Yeah, it's sort of like that subgroup stuff that we used to talk about all the time, with all of our other subgroups.
Right.
And when you're asked to take a test and you're barely fluent and don't have the background, then it definitely skews the data.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Another question that I had is just looking at this, and I know that this is one piece of a larger, puzzle, and we'll be getting the other pieces for high school coming forward, but I can't help but say this, and it's not meant to be critical in any way, but we have a large percentage of students who are on the cusp of graduation, that if you look at this piece alone, are going to be woefully ill-prepared for college, for a variety of other things. And again, recognizing that reading is a basic building block for all other academic subjects, you can't help but believe that what we're going to see with the other reports is maybe something somewhat similar, especially for some of the subgroups. So again, I don't mean to be critical, but I think it's the reality of what we've just seen, and I think that definitely is alarming. But it also points up to me whether or not we need to identify specific interventions for subgroups, and if so, what do those look like, and do we have the ability to do some of that? For a lot of these kids, it's going to be over soon. And I'm trying to figure out how you sort of very quickly pick up the pieces and figure out how to equip them so that they are ready for whatever it is they want to do next. That's our responsibility.
You're right, it is concerning, and you're not being critical.
Well, you are, and appropriately so.
Right,
We're being
right.
critical too. That's our job.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely have to be critical.
There are, Noel talked a bit about some of the interventions through MTSS that are attempting, that we believe are a step in the right direction towards intervening on an on-time, deeper, more meaningful level than we've ever been able to do in the past. We're certainly not suggesting we have that nailed perfectly, but we're pressing schools in that direction and making definite progress there.
Yeah, another thing I would say, Noelle referenced this real briefly, but the school visit that she went on, we're hoping to have 6 schools, one for each of our school networks, 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 4 elementary schools, engage with that very heavily starting this year. And what that will mean is teachers having a much more accurate picture multiple times within a class period of where the student is relative to our learning targets. So modifying and adjusting rigor on the fly as they move through even a class period. And we're putting the building blocks in place to be able to do that, and we will be, I'm confident we will be the model. We'll be the only place in the country that will do that in every single building over the course of the next 3 years. But the standards reference grading piece is really important too, because especially when I think about 11th grade reading, for instance, because one of the things that we used as a motivating piece when we talked to teachers about moving in this direction was 4 years ago when we did some studies of our data and looked at the number of A's and B's in junior English, the high school level, and then compared that with college readiness. There was a ridiculous mismatch. And so we were reporting from a grade standpoint, these kids are college ready, and then that wasn't being reflected in the ACT scores. And so as we continue to work and refine standards reference grading, part of that is making sure that we're being transparent with our students and with our teachers about where our students really are, so that we're not being fooled by a student having what looks like to be very healthy grades, and it isn't really translating into something that is recognized by the ACT or other, external measures of proficiency. And so that's another way that standards reference is really, really important for us, so that there's validity as they move through the system about where they really are relative to those core skills like reading.
And as far as immediate response, all of our high schools have reading interventions in place for the short term. Our long-term solution, and the only thing that's ever going to improve our outlook, is to improve our K-8 experience. It's really hard to make up that ground once they're in high school, especially when they're with, again, wonderfully hardworking teachers who aren't necessarily trained in teaching reading. And so that's where our efforts really need to be, is in that K-8 experience, so that we're not sending kids to high school who have these major deficiencies and then asking them to make up 8 years of ground in those 4 years.
So my only other comment, I guess I have two. This notion around improved instruction, I would really like to dig a little deeper in that to understand what that looks like and how that translates in the classroom. And maybe, it might be good to have you guys and maybe a panel of teachers to talk about that.
Absolutely.
So that we can understand through their, lens, how they're applying the concepts. And then the other thing that sort of came to me, and this isn't my idea, it's something I was listening to at a presentation at the Council of Great City Schools, but a district, I think it was, somewhere in Florida, really began to focus in on feeder patterns and looking at feeder pattern data to inform whether or not interventions were happening the way they needed to at various levels. And I'm assuming we do some of that feeder pattern data dump, whatever. But I would be really interested in learning more about sort of where we see some strengths in feeder patterns and things that are happening. Because I think our district is diverse enough that, it's not just particular feeder patterns that have high achieving children and lower achieving children. I mean, we're diverse in every feeder pattern, I think, in this district. And I think there could be some really interesting lessons learned by at least understanding some of that. And I don't want to take all of your time, but I'm just sort of interested in that, just having sort of heard that, and I was like, I'm sure we do that, but we don't really talk about it very much, so at any rate.
I'll give you a specific example from the Harding to North feeder pattern, and I was just involved, and it's funny you said that, because I was just involved in a conversation where North High School teachers actually initiated it, because what they were finding was kids who were taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade and getting high scores were not seeing success in Algebra 2. And so, of course, the conversation came down to, well, what aren't those middle school teachers doing, right? And of course, that wasn't the case. But what they found through that vertical collaboration was that the interpretation of the standards by the middle school teacher wasn't to the same level of rigor as the interpretation of the standards, same standards, at the high school level. So that's part of our work with SRG, is that calibration of when you see this standard and I see this standard, what does that actually mean? And that's where rigor comes to life. So absolutely, those vertical conversations, not just from 8 to 9, but 5 to 6, because we're seeing that same dip in our 5th to 6th grade data.
And being able to look at the picture of what middle schools are experiencing with students so that we can get them aligned to additional supports and interventions as they walk in the door at high school, and not waiting until something goes more wrong, to just have a clear picture of where they're at. And so I think in terms of intervention specifically, that feeder pattern conversation is a huge piece.
And another element, Terry, I'd add would be the instructional framework and its emphasis on the desired effect, which is always what the student experiences. And so as we're getting better and better at consistent language about what good instruction looks like and what it means to the student, because it's not just about what the teacher does, it's what the outcome for the student is. And so we're looking more and more at evidence of student learning, not teacher teaching, and being more consistent about that and getting certainly more aligned around what that means will reduce that variance as well, not just the variance between interpretation of a standard, but the variance and interpretation of quality teaching and its various aspects.
Ms. Bolson?
Just a quick question on, on how long have we done all ninth grade through standards reference grading? Have we implemented it?
Last
So this
year.
would have been, this test wouldn't have been an indication, or would it have covered?
Last
trying to
year
get the
was the
timing.
first year of implementation.
So we see a trend in most cases up.
Mhm.
So it
Yep.
just kind of might reinforce.
Mhm.
That's why I was trying to get to the
Yep.
timing of when it was implemented versus how we tested to
Right.
see if it's making some
I
improvement.
think the second year is the
With-
best
right.
indicator, and we're in that second year. It
Right.
takes the teachers understandably that first year to kind of grapple with it. But by year 2, that's what I'm hearing from them, that it starts to really make sense. And so we're hoping we'll, in 16,
See a bigger increase.
I hope so.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments?
Just one more, I think,
Ellsworth?
sure, thank you. The PowerPoint, you added some slides, correct? So if we could get that
Yeah, we'll
uploaded
update
onto the,
that.
perfect, thank
Absolutely.
you.
I didn't give you the most recent.
Great. Anything
Thank
further from the board? All right, well, we have a motion. Please vote.
Yeah, I can't see what I'm doing here.
Wait, it's coming up. All right. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. The next item on our agenda is item F3, Des Moines Teacher Retirement System Report. May I have a motion and a second to approve item F3?
Parents, teachers, students, may I have your attention, please? I want to say thank you to all of you for working hard in the best intentions of your daughters or our students. Our classes are now over, and I want to thank each one of you for all the work that you've done and being here. Parents, if you need to speak to your teachers beyond this, you can always email or you can make a phone call and make contact. To all of you, thank you and have a great evening. Teachers, thank you for a very long day. We appreciate all your work. Good night, everybody.
Night, Gary.
A not so subtle reminder that our teachers work many hours past 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there are conferences that just ended at Central. So I asked if we have a motion on F3.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson, second by Ms. Ellsburn. Do we have a presentation?
I have some comments. You have in front of you something that we do every year. This is, you have the annual unaudited Des Moines Teacher Retirement System. This is something we present to the board. This report is also incorporated into a comprehensive financial report that the board will receive at the November 17th meeting. If you had an opportunity to take a look at, I would look at the MD&A. It kind of explains what the program is, how long it's been around, and the purpose. What I want to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about some questions. At the last time I presented this, brought this forward, about what our long-term plans are for this program. As most of you know, we have not only this pension plan, but we also are part of the multi-employer state plan, IPERS. And we have about 400 some active members in this plan and about, what I would say, about 800-900 retirees. One of the big issues, and it's an issue as the administrator and you as the trustees of this plan, is it could be perceived as an issue of equity. let me start off first. IPERS is a defined benefit plan, which means that you have a guarantee, I mean, in other words, you work X number of years, you have a guarantee, and you have a guaranteed retirement. DMTRS is a hybrid. It is a defined contribution plan. With a, when you retire, it becomes kind of a guarantee when you retire. And so for a number of years, this has been an ongoing issue. I think there was a lot of work done back in the 90s about trying to get the district out of this plan. Again, in 2003. I'm here to tell you tonight, basically, I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. As you know, we bought this plan back in-house about a couple years ago. It has taken us some time to get our arms around it, truly understand what we had here. During that time, we also have, engaged a new actuary, and so doing all the analysis and so forth, we now believe that we have a way forward, and by way forward, he ran the numbers mirroring basically IPERS, and I think some of you who have been around realize what the cost was. And that's why they work stopped in the past. But his assumptions are that technically there's no difference between if you take what each individual who accounts in DMTRS, given our contribution rate that we can contribute to IPERS, basically there's no cost to the district to actually merge these two plans. Now, having said that, the devil is always in the details. We have had a number of conversations with IPERS. I have my actuary, my lawyer, or I should say the district's lawyer. IPERS have their lawyers and their actuaries. So you have to think about this think about it as a merger. And so that's kind of where we are. But the interesting thing is that both we are talking. Right now where we are, we have exchanged data. Their actuary is going to run the numbers, and we should have a report back from them in terms of what that might look like sometime in December or January, and then we'll just move on from there. Now, here's the thing we know up front. Our initial proposal to IPERS was they take not only the active employees who are still working, but also our retirees. I can tell you that's not going to happen. Although IPERS has probably 120, 125,000 retirees, they don't want another 800, 900, 1,000. So we get to keep our retirees. Okay. Okay. So what we're now talking about is, a split the plan off. If we do go that way, and the actives will go into IPERS, and we'll keep the retirees in the plan itself will just wind down because those people's money has been set aside and guaranteed and so forth, and then we'll be out of the business. I would tell you the time, when I think about a timeline, we're probably still looking at another year, maybe 18 months. It could come faster. But I think this will actually get us out of a business that I don't really see a need for a school district to be in, school district to be in. This is one of the few plans. I think there's about a dozen left in this country that still exist. At one time, it was a great plan because it predates Social Security. It predates a whole bunch of things, basically. So you want to think about how, from a forward-looking, people in Des Moines was back in 1906 and whatever and so forth, and that was pretty far-reaching for looking, basically. So with that, I will just kind of open up the questions.
Ms. Ellsburn?
Sure. So another 12 to 18 months before the possibility of the divided merger with IPERS.
Right. It could go faster.
Okay.
I'm just saying I just kind of know how this stuff kind of goes. I think the big key point is once we get their actuarial numbers, and if they kind of match up, then I think the process will kind of move forward. But there are other things that we have to do to move this forward. For example, the way this plan was put together, you have to have a vote of the participants in the plan to do this.
Okay.
The board just can't automatically do it. Then there's a whole long length of things that from an IRS standpoint, that we have what I call technical things we have to do. So as I said, the devil's in the details trying to work all that stuff out. So we could have agreement in principle early on, but by the time the transaction is complete, it could be 12 to 18 months.
And then another 20 to 40 years of owning the retiree plan. Unless can it be phased out as the decline in numbers?
Yes. Most of the people in our plan, you notice in the MD&A, the mortality rate. I mean,
61 to 107.
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Long after
and the people in this plan tend to live a long time. Matter of fact, they do live a long time. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that.
Yeah, but it could be. In other words, Kathy McKay and her group could be, or the benefits group could be dealing with our some retirees for a considerable period of time.
Right.
And like I said, my initial proposal to IPERS was, since they had so many, and they had the infrastructure to deal with that, it just made sense to me. And it doesn't mean that that deal is totally off the table, but that's kind of set. That's kind of where we are right now.
Ms. Boson.
I was just going to bring up a couple. Incoming employees now primarily go to IPERS, correct?
Right. Other words, as of now, we don't formally let anyone go into that plan, especially someone young. I mean, in other words, what I would consider just starting out, basically. We want our default option is IPERS.
Okay. Another thing too, if the plans would split, you would have how many, 400 or so of our teachers are in the current plan?
Well, I think it's a combination of teachers. I think it's a combination of teachers and administrators. This plan covers both.
Okay, but then the people that are already retired, the money is very secure.
Right.
I don't want to give the impression that if you do split, but the money is set aside, so any retiree would get their portion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I might also say that the board-appointed advisory committee that meets on a quarterly basis, basically, have been actively involved in this process all along the way.
That's all I had. I just wanted to make some clarification. Mm-hmm. So everybody, whenever you're changing retirement plans, people might get concerned.
One of the things I think we probably, as this thing after tonight and after our advisory meeting a week and a half ago, so forth, one of the things I think we're probably going to do, you can probably see, the retirees and the active employees will probably see more communication from us in terms of, here's what we're doing, here's the impact on you. So we want to really begin to build a communication plan, basically, so we're talking to people, right along the way. So this won't catch them by surprise. And that, I will tell you, that was the first question out of the retiree's mouth. Well, what's going to happen to me? When I have a question, who am I going to call, and so forth.
I just want to follow up too. When we were talking early retirement, I know many teachers came up to us that were in the Des Moines plan versus IPERS, and they were asking about going over, and would that be a possibility? So I think some of that discussion started coming up from there, and how we really should run the plans and what would be the best for our employees in the long run.
Right.
Additional comment? Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
I'm trying to understand the numbers. So it looks like there were 4 members who left that were not vested, 1 person that joined in 2015, and then it looks like there are 46 that retired under the plan in 2015, and about, 500 being served by the plan currently? I was just looking at this graph. What are the numbers?
Which page are you on?
Well, I was actually just, I don't even know, page 5,
Okay.
maybe? So total number of active members has been on the decline, and it looks like it's currently around, what,
Little over 500.
This is
about
page 4 you're
500,
looking at.
400 something?
Yeah,
It's page 4, Thomas.
Yeah.
okay. Right.
So are we talking about almost 500 members that are currently retired?
No, the retirees is way more, basically.
Those are
These
active.
members. These are active
Okay.
members, and those
So-
are the, yeah.
What's the number that are actually being served by the plan currently?
Oh, in terms of retirees, I want to say we have right around 900 probably.
800 or 900?
Yeah, yeah.
And you said that we would, under the phase out or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
we would maintain the retirees.
Right.
But anybody who's not of retirement age that's still in this plan potentially would transition to IPERS.
Right.
But it still requires a vote of all of the members.
Yeah, that's how the bylaws are written.
Right.
But yes.
And what's the threshold? Is it a simple majority?
I think it's a simple majority. Yeah, because we have to take, for example, when we wanted to raise the contribution rate, they had to,
Right.
they had to vote.
Good luck.
Okay.
Any further question?
Oh.
Comment? Anything more, Thomas?
No, I just want to say that's why we have good lawyers working on this. Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote to approve this report. Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Next item on the agenda, we have items of privilege. The chair's report. I have a very brief chair's report. I will always do free advertisement for my friends at DMEA. We have on October 29th their second community conversation on public education in the area. It is Thursday, October 29th from 5 to 9 p.m. here at Central Campus. Everyone is welcome. Free childcare for children between the ages of 5 and 10. They'll have a shuttle bus available from 4 to 4:45 at both at North, East, Moulton, and Edmonds. That's nice. And dinner will be served free of charge. There's no cost to attend this. It's a very nice conversation and opportunity to engage the community on public education. Moving on from that, I always love the opportunity to get into the schools and try and carve out as much time a month as I can to do that. And I had a nice tour of Hoover and Meredith this morning with Tom, and brought along our mayor, Frank County, and our city manager, Scott Sanders, neither of whom had been in a school for a little while. And so it turned out to be a nice opportunity for them to see the good things that are happening here in Des Moines, and ask some really insightful questions about what public education looks like here in Des Moines. And as we move on into the year, I'll look for more opportunities to visit schools, as will all of my fellow board members, and bring any new friends along for the ride. That's it for Chair's report. Do we have a superintendent's report?
Yeah, just briefly. Last spring, Bill Good, Phil Rader, and myself attended a meeting of the leadership, I think it's called the Leadership Council of the Des Moines Area Realtors Association, or Des Moines Association of Realtors, I guess it is, DMAR. Sharing information about our schools and trying to help them overcome some challenges in moving homes in Des Moines that some people tie back to decisions made by families regarding school choice. And what we shared with them turned into a very rich conversation and opened lots of eyes of the leadership of DMAR to what the reality is of Des Moines schools. And so we scheduled another meeting where we could meet with more of their membership. And this morning, Phil and I visited with about 200 of the realtors that belong to DMAR. We were ironically in Johnston, not in Des Moines, but we made a presentation that lasted about 40 minutes, and then a discussion that ensued was over an hour. And once they officially closed things down, we had about a dozen people waiting to speak in more detail with us. And I think I recruited a potential member of our 3D program who might have a very short way to go to join our teaching ranks. So that's one of the immediate payoffs. But a lot of folks who are dealing with real estate don't know much about Des Moines schools, and there's a lot to know about Des Moines schools. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and we got lots of very positive feedback and continue to receive positive feedback and surprised feedback from a number of folks that attended that meeting through the afternoon, and I'm sure we'll have more follow-up discussions. Our next step with that move is to have breakfast right here in this room that will be prepared by our culinary arts students, and then provide an opportunity for that same group of people to actually get into our schools and experience firsthand, like Mayor County and City Manager Sanders had today, to remove some of the mystery about what's happening within the walls of Des Moines Public Schools, and see that the wonderful diversity that our student body brings and the amazing work that our students do with those teachers, and hopefully attract more families to make a conscious choice to reside within Des Moines so they can take advantage of all that we have to offer. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.